The earth is what we all have in common. This quote by American author and environmental activist Wendell Berry is all too true. As such, we as a society must realize that to solve the encroaching environmental issues of our time, it is the only logical route to assume that all nations of the world must work together to achieve anything meaningful. In 2015, this is what the United Nations set out to do with the 32-page-long Paris Climate Accords, whose main objective is to limit the severity of climate change and its effects. It was created over 2 weeks through the collaboration of a multitude of nations at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. My name is Brianna Christensen, and I will always believe that being an informed citizen is of unparalleled importance. I am here today as an advocate and educator. I have for many years been convinced of the significance of environmental sustainability and have so compelled as to make it the focus of my life. I plan to major in environmental management and minor in policy studies at university. It is where my passion lies, and I am glad to be here today to share the knowledge I have acquired in my studies thus far. Earlier, I discussed briefly the creation and intentions of the Paris Climate Accords. What I did not mention is that the United States made the decision to leave the agreement in 2017, and that decision will be finalized on November 4th of this year. This is damaging to every nation, but especially to the US. In this speech, I will set out to describe how a possible rejoining to the agreement would benefit the United States, putting it on good terms with other nations, preventing irreversible climate change from taking hold, and saving a great deal of money in the long term. So, why is our involvement so important? Let's investigate. If the United States rejoins the agreement, it will improve our international image and make the agreement's goals capable of being carried out. As we can see from this diagram from Business Insider, 197 nations are part of the agreement already, and we appear uncooperative and isolationist by not taking part. Inherently so, as the statistics show. We are the largest economy in the world, according to GDP per capita, and one of the most influential, but have failed a test of diplomacy by retracting from our promise. According to Investopedia, the US economy makes up nearly 1/4 of the global economy. Its GDP, measured to be 21 trillion in 2019, is overshadowed only by China, which came in at about 27 trillion. This means that other countries will follow the direction that we lead, and we have to be careful what that direction is. As the number 2 carbon emitter on Earth, other than China, it is our responsibility to take leadership in efforts to reverse the effect of those emissions. As we can see from this carbon dioxide emissions from fuel combustion from 2015, the United States came in second as compared to China. So this also compares similarly to the US Energy Information Administration's estimates that in 2017, the United States emitted 5.1 billion metric tons of energy-related carbon dioxide, while the global emissions of energy-related carbon dioxide totaled 32.5 billion metric tons. Furthermore, without the US's investment in the agreement, its international goal for the reduction of emissions is nearly impossible to achieve, it being the Paris Climate Accords. According to the NRDC's Melissa Dinchak, the Kyoto Agreement was a precursor to the Paris Climate Accords, and it failed. This is because 3 highly influential nations, being the United States, India, and China, would not sign. The United States' commitment to the Paris Agreement in 2015 encouraged China to match our carbon output reduction goals. This push halted when we left, exacerbating the negative impact of our departure. Furthermore, a commitment from the United States might keep climate disaster from taking hold, saving millions of lives and dollars. The Paris Climate Agreement aims to keep the average global temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius from pre-industrial levels in the hopes of mitigating the natural disasters, famine, and deaths correlated with climate change. Let's take this graph, for example. Sea level rise. In this chart from NOAA, we see how it has rarely decreased or stagnated between 1993 and 2019, but has in most areas of ocean increased. This can be linked to glacial melt connected to climate change and the heating of the globe, which can threaten communities and economies that exist on the coasts. This is just one example of how climate change can affect people and the economy. Although a huge investment now, clean infrastructure and renewable energy will create millions of American jobs. The money lost from inaction far outweighs the upfront commitment of investment. Let's take an article published by NRDC in 2018 that says the clean energy sector already employs more than 3 million Americans, about 14 times the number of coal, gas, oil, and other fossil fuel industry workers that existed in America at that time. The same article warned that a worldwide failure to meet criteria laid out in the Paris Climate Agreement could reduce global GDP more than 25% by century's end. As reported by Vox, an interactive diagram created by physicist and engineer Saul Griffith models America's energy production and how it moves from raw materials to use. This is the diagram, and it ultimately shows how a transfer to renewable energy and decarbonized economy is achievable through electrification, from raw material to its ultimate goal. Once we electrify, it is easier to get from point A to point B in a clean manner. My survey from those that we made a couple of weeks ago shows support for the agreement in our classroom. These 3 questions show that people in our class think that the United States is responsible for leadership in climate change, and also that climate change is a big deal to them. 100% of respondents here answered yes to these questions. But more telling and direct statistics show that Americans as a whole feel the same. According to the UN Foundation's Justine Sullivan, a nationally representative survey conducted after the 2016 elections found that Americans overwhelmingly support US participation in the Paris Agreement by a margin of 5-1. So it seems, by this evidence at least, that it might have been a slap in the face to not only our own nation, but also to the nearly 200 others who were relying on our commitment when we departed from the agreement. But regardless of how slowly, injuries have the ability to heal. Leaving the Paris Agreement takes several years to officiate, but only about a month's time to rejoin. This means that although we diverged from the plan for several years, getting back on track should be relatively quick. The United States rejoining the Paris Accords would benefit it in innumerable ways, from improving its image and diplomacy to securing the long-term security of its citizens and economy. Now all that is left is to make this change. Thank you so much for listening.